we've been seeing a lot of reopen such and such protests lately. Reopen Michigan, reopen Idaho, whatever. And a lot of the larger ones have been astroturfed. Astroturfing is where a big money funder funds protests, funds people to go out and make it look like this is some kind of grassroots thing that has real support among the people. And a lot of this has been pretty clear astroturfing. In Michigan, for example, which was one of the larger protests, there were pretty clear links to organizations funded by the DeVos family. Betsy DeVos is a Secretary of Education in the Trump administration, and her family has huge, their tentacles are just all over Michigan politics. It's really terrible what they've done to the education system in that state. They are huge charter advocates, really just destroying public education. Any good public service that the government does, the DeVos family is trying to destroy it and privatize it and stuff. So there's a lot of really clear astroturfing going on. It's just not real. And we can also see that in the states that are not electorally important for Republicans, like Alabama, where they've got a stranglehold on the political scene. The protests have just been pathetic. Like in Huntsville last weekend, there was a Reopen Alabama protest that had 10 people there. But funnily enough, the protest was so small that they weren't even technically violating the social distancing guidelines while they were protesting social distancing. So, you can see clearly there's political motivation to do these AstroTurf campaigns in swing states like Michigan or like Idaho, places like that could be potentially electorally important. But Alabama, they've got this state on lock, so they don't need to they don't need to invest a lot of money in making it look like people are upset here, so they don't. And you can see what the results are. The results are people don't largely want to reopen completely. They want to make sure that everything is done orderly, everything is done safely, and that they're safe and their family is safe and their community is safe.
Yeah, and if you look at the last, I was looking this morning, if you look at the trending since Kay Ivey finally announced, the shelter in place, it's really started trending down, and you can see that it made a tremendous amount of difference, because we were on an upward trajectory, and now we've actually new cases are dropping, so that's a great thing. Right.
Yeah. It's the guidelines are working. People are following them by and large, and so we're seeing a decrease in new cases and new deaths, and so that's good. But one of the problems that the protesters are identifying that I think that it's important to actually take a little bit of time to think about is this idea that these social distancing, these stay-at-home orders, that they're creating a police state. And it's really easy to dismiss these complaints because anybody that is really concerned about authoritarianism and police brutality knows that we have been living under a police state for basically the entirety of the existence of the United States. It just doesn't largely affect white folks or well-off white folks. And now that it does, they're upset. And so it's really easy to dismiss those concerns as like, you didn't care before, but you care now because you can't get your hair cut. Screw you, like, stay at home, right? And yes, screw them, they need to stay at home. But also there are some real genuine concerns, because when police power and state power begins affecting white folks, begins affecting well-off folks, it affects marginalized communities even more than that. And we see a local story that exemplifies exactly that. Just about an hour south of here in Albertville, the police department issued a memo to residents that it would begin rigorously enforcing a years-old ordinance against multifamily dwellings. Now, again, this ordinance is years old, but they were not previously proactively going and like checking and enforcing it. When an issue came up, they said that they would issue a citation, but now they're going to be going out proactively into the community and checking to see if a dwelling has multiple families in it, and issuing citations or legal consequences. And that's just absurd. It's criminalizing poverty. It's it's unjustifiable. I've seen these memes about that say if you snitched on somebody for violating a stay-at-home order, you would have snitched on Anne Frank or something. Yeah. And a lot of times that's a bit hyperbolic. But seriously, like, if you are calling the police on a family that is so poor that they can't afford separate dwellings for their separate families, and with the knowledge that the result is going to be they are put in jail or they are fined for $500 that they don't have, obviously, because there are 2 or 3 or 4 families living in the same house, then you're a bad person, okay? Like, you are a bad person if you're calling the cops on a poor family that has to live with other families. And frankly, if you're a cop that's enforcing this order, like, you're a bad cop. That's not okay. You can't just use the excuse, I'm just following orders. These have real consequences for real people. And like, a just law or an unjust law is no law at all. And it really, really rankles me that they had the audacity to put this out there, that they had the audacity to create this ordinance in the first place. And it's clearly aimed at the Hispanic community in Albertville. The Hispanic community has been growing and growing consistently over the years, and a lot of them are extremely poor. A lot of them are undocumented, and they don't have the money to live in single family units, and so they're living together. And
what's unfortunate is a lot of these families, a lot of the conservatives now that won't stand up for this type of policing effort, were the same families that a generation or 2 generations ago were the exact same ones that was living in this abject poverty. Right. My parents come from multi-family dwellings, and we're only a generation or 2 removed from the exact poverty levels that the Hispanics are living in, or not all of them, but some of the Hispanics are living in now. And it's really unfortunate that the generation now is not listening to their grandparents talk about the poverty that they went through.
It's really unfortunate. And we've seen videos, I don't know if you have, David, or any of the others listening to this, but I've seen videos of NYPD officers manhandling children and Black adults for not wearing masks on the subway in New York, instead of just providing masks. Like, how much cheaper would it be to just give the cops masks to hand out to people that are not wearing them than it is to pay dozens and dozens of cops to stand guard on the subway and arresting people for not wearing masks? It's absurd.
Risking people's health. I mean, you're risking the exact people that the police that are there supposedly to protect and serve, but the exact people that are there to protect and serve, you're risking their health by asking them, to come in closer contact with these people.
Right. You can't socially distance while you're arresting a person. Yeah. It's just not possible. And those 2 things, to me, really show what is deep in the DNA of America, the tendency towards punishment and retribution and away from solidarity and mutual aid. We can see it in the uniquely punitive response in the United States to the crime waves of the 80s and 90s. Instead of investing in education or anti-poverty programs or rehabilitation programs like so many other civilized Western countries did, we just threw people in prison. And it did not do anything for the crime rates. The crime rates decreased at the same rate as every other Western country. And we can see it now in the way that some of the stay-at-home orders and public health guidelines are being enforced. Yep. We have to resist the pull towards authoritarianism that is truly wrapped up in the DNA of America, and reach towards something else that I believe is really wrapped up in the DNA of America. That is the impulse towards justice, towards freedom, and towards solidarity. You know, like oppression, authoritarianism is really fundamental to America, but that's not all that America is. America also has deep traditions of liberation movements, of freedom movements, of solidarity between workers, and we have got to resist the pull towards the authoritarianism that's in our blood, and move towards the liberation and the freedom and the solidarity that's in our blood. And you know, obviously a lot of these people are just, you know, they are not thinking clearly about the words police state and what it actually means, and a lot of their concerns are overblown. They do just want to get a haircut, or Karen does just want to get a manicure or a pedicure. But there are real concerns, and there are real instances of police abuse of power in marginalized communities, in poor Black and brown communities, and towards poor white folks, that we need to take a look at, and we need to make, and we need to fight against, because it's not good.
Yeah, and you know, to touch on something that you said a while ago, you know, as far as America being very authoritarian, and the history and things like that, and I just, you know, I'm going to disagree with you there a little bit. I think Americans are a whole lot more based on libertarianism and freedoms, and even though you wouldn't think it in the South right now, it's very, very, you know, the history there is very anti-authoritarian, and the big pushback against big government, big business, corporations, federal banking, and things like that. We've got a long history of supporting those anti-authoritarian forces, but somewhere in the last 20 to 30 years, the conservative side of the political spectrum has convinced a lot of these anti-authoritarian people that you know, that they're it's a good thing. You know, it's they've twisted what we originally believed in, and made it sound like, I'm having a difficult time expressing what I'm trying to say, but made it sound like the authoritarianism is good so long as it's authoritarianism that supports what I believe in,
right,
and not what is for the betterment of the society or the community as a whole.
Right. Yeah, and you know, I don't disagree with that at all. I think, you know, like I said, I do believe that a tendency towards authoritarianism and oppression and you know, white supremacy and patriarchy really runs deep in the American tradition, and I do believe that that's true. But I also believe that there is a just as strong current of anti-authoritarian struggle, of freedom struggles, and anti-racist, anti-sexist, and pro-worker movements that run through America. And we have to run towards that and away from the former, because, you know, freedom, justice, solidarity, that's where we want to go. And you know, a lot of this that we're seeing is not that.
Yeah, maybe if we play the national anthem during the stay-at-home orders, that the people will be less inclined to protest. You know, since
Maybe.
that's the whole big push is we don't need to protest during the national anthem.
Maybe.
Maybe we should have Kay Ivey playing the national
Just
anthem.
play the national anthem on the tornado sirens.
Yes, exactly. That could
24/7.
That could fix the whole problem, or at the very minimum, show the overt racism that's in all of these protests.
Right.
You just watched a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We're in North Alabama talking about the news for workers by workers. We're going to be on the radio on 92.5 FM, 770 AM in the Huntsville, Decatur, Athens listening area on Saturdays from 9:30 to 11 a.m. beginning in May. We believe that this is a really good opportunity to put new ideas in front of a conservative talk show audience. This is an audience that has never so much as heard the word union in a positive light. But we need help raising the funds to purchase the airtime. So if you could afford to send us a few bucks, you can do that by going to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you can't afford to do that, that's fine too. There are a lot of people going through some really rough times right now. So if you could just share our videos, that would be really helpful. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you.